The mornings in the quiet little suburb began like clockwork. Birds chirped their melodic songs, leaves rustled in the breeze, and the warm sun peeked through gaps in the clouds. In this peaceful neighborhood was a park that held stories unknown to most. A park where small acts of kindness created ripples that changed lives. For Michael, the park was more than just a place to play. At 9 years old, he was a curious and thoughtful boy, always noticing things others overlooked. With his mop of blonde hair and vivid green eyes, he carried an air of quiet wonder. The park was his escape from the chaos at home. His parents loved him, but their frequent arguments over work, money, and their struggles to stay afloat created a tense environment. The walls of their small home often seemed to echo with raised voices, and Michael, caught in the middle, would retreat to the park to find solace. One day, as Michael wandered through the park, his favorite book in hand, he noticed an elderly man sitting on a weathered wooden bench. The man's clothes were patched and frayed, his thick beard slightly unkempt. Yet, there was something about him that intrigued Michael. Beside him sat a golden retriever, its tail wagging lazily as the man whispered to it. Michael watched from a distance as the man broke a small piece of bread and handed it to the dog. The man's face lit up as the dog happily took the treat. Though their lives seemed humble, Michael saw something in their connection, an unspoken bond that radiated warmth. The next day, Michael decided to do something kind. He took an extra sandwich from the kitchen before heading to the park. Carefully wrapping it in a napkin, he placed it on the bench where he had seen the man. Then, hiding behind a tree, he waited. Sure enough, the elderly man arrived with his dog. He paused when he saw the sandwich, his expression a mix of surprise and gratitude. After looking around, as though searching for the person who had left it, he sat down and opened the napkin. Smiling, he broke the sandwich in half, giving the larger piece to his dog before eating the rest himself. Michael's heart swelled with happiness as he watched. From that day forward, he made it a routine to leave a sandwich on the bench every morning. Sometimes he hid to see the man's reaction. Other times, he simply imagined it. This small act became a source of joy for Michael, a way to bring light to someone else's life. Weeks passed, and Michael became increasingly attached to the routine. He even started to think of the man and his dog as Mr. Greg and Buddy, though they had never spoken. To Michael, they were like characters in one of his beloved books, each visit to the park adding a new chapter to their story. But one crisp autumn morning, everything changed. Michael approached the bench with a sandwich in hand, only to find a well-dressed man sitting there instead. The man, wearing a tailored suit, was flanked by 2 bodyguards who stood silently a few feet away. In the man's hand was an old photograph, and his expression was one of deep sadness. Michael froze, unsure of what to do. He hesitated, clutching the sandwich tightly. Why was this man sitting on their bench? Where were Mr. Greg and Buddy? Summoning his courage, Michael approached. "Excuse me," he said softly. The man looked up, startled, and the bodyguards tensed. Seeing it was just a child, the man's expression softened. "Yes," he replied. Michael glanced nervously at the bodyguards, then at the photograph. "Are you looking for someone?" The man studied him for a moment before nodding. "I'm looking for my father," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "He used to come here with his dog, a golden retriever. Do you know him?" Michael's heart raced. "You mean Mr. Greg and Buddy?" The man's eyes widened slightly. "You know them?" Michael nodded. "I see them here almost every day. I leave food for them sometimes, but I haven't seen them in a few days." The man let out a heavy sigh, running a hand through his neatly combed hair. "I've been looking for him for years," he admitted. "We had a falling out. I thought I didn't need him. But now I realize how wrong I was. I want to make things right." Michael felt a pang of sympathy. "Maybe he'll come back tomorrow," he offered. The man gave a faint smile. "Maybe," he said, though his voice carried a note of doubt. "Thank you for telling me." That night, Michael lay awake, thinking about the man on the bench. What had happened between him and Mr. Greg? The next morning, determined to help, Michael grabbed 2 sandwiches and headed to the park early. He sat under the oak tree, watching and waiting. Hours passed, and just as he was about to give up, he saw them. Mr. Greg and Buddy, walking slowly down the path. Relief washed over him. but it was short-lived as the man in the suit appeared, striding toward the bench. "Dad!" the man called out, his voice breaking. Mr. Gregg stopped in his tracks. For a moment, he looked like he might turn and walk away, but something in his son's voice made him stay. Slowly, he turned around. "Richard?" Mr. Gregg said, his voice a mix of surprise and caution. "It's me, Dad," Richard replied, taking a hesitant step forward. "I've been looking for you." The two stood there, the weight of years of silence hanging between them. Michael held his breath, watching from behind the tree. "Why now?" Mr. Gregg asked, his tone guarded. Richard swallowed hard. "Because I realized how much I've lost. I was young and stupid. I thought I didn't need you. But I was wrong. I've made mistakes, Dad. So many mistakes. But I want to make things right, if you'll let me." For a long moment, Mr. Gregg said nothing. Buddy sat quietly at his feet, sensing the gravity of the moment. Finally, Mr. Gregg spoke, his voice soft but steady. "You broke my heart, Richard. You pushed me away when all I ever wanted was to help you. I waited for years, hoping you would come back, but you never did." Richard's eyes filled with tears. "I know, Dad, and I'm so sorry. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to try." Mr. Gregg's tough exterior cracked. He took a deep breath and looked at his son. "I missed you, Richard," he said quietly. Richard stepped forward and the two embraced, their years of pain and regret spilling out in quiet sobs. Michael wiped his own eyes, overwhelmed by the scene unfolding before him. From that day on, the park became a place of healing for the three of them. Michael, Mr. Gregg, and Richard would sit on the bench together, sharing stories and laughter. Richard began bringing sandwiches of his own, and Buddy became the happiest dog in the park, wagging his tail non-stop. On Michael's birthday, Richard and Mr. Gregg surprised him with a golden retriever puppy with a bright red bow around its neck. "We thought you might like a friend of your own," Richard said with a smile. Michael hugged the puppy tightly, tears streaming down his face. "I'll name him Buddy Jr.," he said, looking at the older dog who had brought them all together. The bond between Michael and the two men grew stronger with each passing day. For Richard, the park became a place of redemption. For Mr. Gregg, it became a place of forgiveness. And for Michael, it became a reminder of the power of kindness and connection. This story shows how small acts of kindness can create ripples of change that transform lives. Michael's simple habit of leaving sandwiches led to a reunion that healed a family and brought joy to his own life. It's a powerful reminder that compassion, no matter how small, can bridge divides and bring people together. If this story touched your heart, please like the video and subscribe to Life Stories 365. Share your experiences of kindness or forgiveness in the comments. We'd love to hear them.